And my hope with that is that maybe in the future, people that have kids like that, or not just kids, even adults, that if they find out about this, that we can draw more people into this because we actually have classes that make sense for them to enter.
You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to The Ride, a bi-weekly podcast brought to you by Horse&Rider magazine, co-hosted by Nichole and Devin Conley. In each episode, we chat with some of the industry's top trainers, clinicians, horsekeeping experts, and professionals to share inspiring stories, training philosophies, and the importance of living your best Western horse life. On this week's episode of The Ride, we sit down to talk to Linde von Koeding. Linde is a National Reining Horse Association professional and judge, and she trains reining horses and coaches non-pro riders to an international level. Linde was also recently named Trainer of the Year, a program that is brought to you by Horse&Rider and Cosequin.
This episode is brought to you by Cosequin. Cosequin ASU joint and hoof pellets contain quality ingredients to support joint and hoof health and leave out the fillers, molasses, and alfalfa, all while delivering the taste horses love. The colors of our ingredients shine through for a difference you can see. Visit cosequinequine.com.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Nichole. I'm here with my co-host, Devin. And today we have a very special guest, actually the winner of our Trainer of the Year program that Horse&Rider and Cosequin do each year, where we get to have people around the country nominate their horse trainers and tell us just why they deserve to be the Trainer of the Year. And this year's winner is Linde von Koeding, who is an NRHA professional based in Scottsdale, Arizona. But Linde, you're actually from Germany originally, which is I think a first for our Trainer of the Year in competition. So you kind of bring an international group to us. We had people from Germany and different parts of Europe also nominating you, which I think was a first. So congratulations on your win, first of all. And thank you for joining us on our podcast. And I guess, you know, for the people who might not be familiar with you or the reining industry, can you kind of talk a little about your upbringing and kind of how you got into reining to begin with?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in the city and not around horses. My family has nothing to do with horses, but for some reason, I was always interested in horses. I mean, before I could even talk, if there's a horse around, I'd point at it and I would want to go over there and pet it. And, it's just, I don't know, I was just born with it. And then as I got a little bit older, I tried to find ways of getting to the barn and getting to ride. And it was just limited, for us time-wise, financially, and location-wise. So I always said that at some point I was going to move out and I was going to go do something with horses. And the first time I came to the States was in 2006. And the people I ended up with were reiners. It was Bob Anthony. He's in the Hall of Fame for NRHA. And that was my first exposure to reining. And I just fell in love with it. And then just one thing led to another and one job led to another. And I just kind of stuck with it. And I haven't regretted it since.
So you came to the United States to kind of learn about reining, although reining has a pretty large following over in Europe. Had you had any experience with it there, or did you really just kind of come to the United States looking to just find any kind of industry to get involved with the horses, or was reining kind of something that you were kind of gearing towards?
I was not planning on the reining. I had seen it in Europe because I've been to a few horse shows over there where they had the reining along with some other disciplines. But that was really coincidence. I just had a connection to the Anthonys, and they happened to be reiners, and then that's kind of how that got started.
I'm curious about in 2006 when you came to the States for the first time, what drew you here initially? If it wasn't necessarily the reining industry, was there something that really drew you to come here during that time?
Originally it was just supposed to be a 3-month summer to learn English and just get away from home and just do something different. And I didn't really plan on moving over here full time right after that. I was pretty young back then too. So that just kind of happened because I ended up liking it so much. And I was 16 at the time. I was really planning on going back home and going to college and doing all those things. And then they just never happened.
So when you came here back then, did you go back home and ride for a little bit over, back in Germany, or did you like pack your bags and just immediately move to the States and start working and riding?
I wanted to just come straight back, but because I was under 18, I couldn't get a work visa. So I went back and forth. I rode and worked some at home, and I'd come over for a few months and work for somebody. And then when I turned 18 is when I got my first visa, and then I just from there I was able to keep renewing them and just stay.
Do you have any ties still to the horse industry in Germany, or do you do anything over there, or are you pretty much completely
Yeah,
based out of the States now?
No, I have connections over there. I have horses in training that are owned by people over in Europe, and then I've done some clinics over there, and every time I go over there, I usually end up doing something horse related. So, we all stay pretty connected, and especially for buying and selling horses, people like to deal with people overseas that they know and they can trust, So, I mean, there's a lot of business going on just across the ocean too.
It's really cool how international the reining industry is. And my first real experience with some of the international riders was at the World Equestrian Games in 2018, and seeing the horses that they flew over, because a lot of them, like Bernard Funk, like they bring their horses over, and it was really cool to see just how big it is over there. And then since then, I've been part of more of the reining, and being able to see some of the events they're putting on there. And like you said, there's a lot of horse buying and selling, there's a lot going to Europe, but now there's horses coming back from Europe to the United States. And my best friend just bought one that was in Italy for a long time and now is here in the States. And it's just really cool to see how international this Western sport is, because everybody always tries to, thinks that it's the English sports that are the international ones, and people are flying their horses everywhere and whatnot.
Yeah, it is definitely very international. I've been to the WEG I was in Kentucky. I think it was 2010, and it's pretty cool that people just bring their horses all over and fly them in for 2 weeks and just to compete and all of that. And like you said, it's picked up that horses are flown over from Europe to stay over here, and that's a little bit more of a new development, I think. I mean, we've seen it sometimes, but very rarely. But now that people from the States will go and shop in Europe and then fly them back here, and that's definitely something that has picked up more over the last 2, 3 years, I think.
So okay, let's kind of we've talked a little bit about how you ended up in the United States, and you've mentioned working with the Anthonys, but who were some of the other people that you rode with? You've mentioned that you worked for a few trainers, and like, who would you say were kind of your mentors as you transitioned into the reining industry?
My second job after the Anthony's was with Mike McIntyre in North Carolina, and I still use a lot of the stuff that I've learned from him, and um, he's helped me a lot to make sure I don't overcomplicate things. Like, and I'm really really happy that I got to work for him early on, where I feel like I have a really simple foundation for the younger horses. And I think it's important for the young horses because it's much easier for them to learn and progress when you can keep things pretty simple for them. And then I like simple anyways because it makes it easier for me and my non-pros to show down the road as well. So I've learned a lot from Mike, and he's also the one that got me interested in the judging, and that's the reason he was one of the reasons why I got my card, because he was on the committee at the time. So whenever he had to judge some runs and needed a scribe to do that, I was doing that for him. So he got me started on that as well, which the judging also helps me a lot, being a better horse trainer, better coach, better showman, because it just shows you what matters, what doesn't matter. It just kind of makes you prioritize a little bit differently. And then my last job was in Arizona. I worked for Martin Wilstetter, and I worked for him for several years. And I really appreciate everything they have taught me as well. And they've, even after I left, they've continued to mentor me and help me, just also on the business side of things. Just help me how to treat your customers, how to treat your help, how to go about things. If I have a question, I can always call them, or they're just 5 minutes down the road from me, so I can haul over there and ride some and ask them some questions. And so And there's been others. I've worked for Casey Deary and Sterling Ranch for a little bit. But Mike and Mike and Martin probably were my big mentors. And now I live in an area where we have a lot of horse trainers, which is just very nice because we have many very accomplished horsemen just on the street. And I mean on the street, 5 minutes, 10 minutes down the road. So I spend a lot of time over at Storybook Stables, and I ride with Arno Honstetter and Patrick Flaherty, and they've helped me a lot over the last few years, especially since I went out on my own.
That's my favorite part about Scottsdale is where you are. When you say down the road, it's literally down the road. When you're driving on Rio Verde, I mean, you see ranch after ranch after ranch, and a lot of these guys are training out of the same properties together. And obviously not everybody in this industry has the ability to just drive down the road and get help from other professionals, which I think is such a game changer. Can you kind of talk a little bit about like, as a professional, you're still going to get help because you're still continuing to learn and improve. And, it's something that I think we forget is that we can never stop learning. So what is it that you're kind of looking to accomplish when you're going to work with some of these other trainers who are your friends, mentors, whatever?
I think the biggest thing we all try to accomplish is just be better horsemen, and that will lead to all the other things we're trying to accomplish, which is getting our horses trained to the best they can be, and getting them shown to the best of their ability, and getting better too. It's just for me, it's important to be good for my customers too. And if I learn something new, then I can also incorporate it into my lessons or preparing their horses and all of that. So I just think that we always need to get better, otherwise you're gonna get left behind, and and that's the beauty of it too. It's never gonna get old. It's never gonna get boring because there's always something new you can learn. So you'll never have it all figured out, and there's always something that you can improve on. Which when you come home from a horse show, you always want to know that you can do something better for the next time. You know.
I think that's just great advice. Yeah, for anybody, professional all the way down to complete beginners, that you can always be improving. And when did you decide to go out on your own and start your own training practice and taking in your own clients after working with so many like renowned trainers? When did you feel comfortable and ready for that next step?
I don't think I've necessarily felt comfortable doing it. It was just I got to a point where I knew I had to make that jump and give it a shot. That was in 2017. And I kind of figured that if it doesn't work, I can always go back to work for somebody. But at some point, if you want to build something of your own, then you need to just kind of jump in the deep end and see if you'll float or sink.
Absolutely. And since you've started your program, you have a very large clientele of non-professional riders. And in fact, that's how you won this competition, is that the trainer of the year competition, is that some of your clients had nominated you as trainer of the year. Can you kind of talk a little bit about your program? Because not every horse trainer that we talk to on this podcast focuses on the non-professional. Some of them are just, cult starters. Some of them only focus on the open horses, but I think it takes a really special horse trainer to be able to compete in the open events, which is what you're doing, but then also have a large non-pro clientele and be able to coach those non-pros through their riding.
I think that living in an area like this where it's so competitive and there's so many alternatives for clients, I think, especially when you're starting out, you don't get to be that picky. First of all, right? You don't start out with a barn full of open horses. And then I've just been very fortunate that I've ended up with a great group of people. Like it's been really fun. This year has been a good group of people. They're all getting along. They're all supporting each other, and they all either had nice horses when they came, or now ended up with horses that work for their goals. And I truly enjoy it. Like for me, coaching is something very different from training in a way, because on the training part, I take it all on me how that horse is performing, where versus the coaching, you really got to sink another person to it. And it's a little bit of a different challenge, I think, preparing the horse and then make sure somebody else can operate it also. And I don't know, I enjoy those non-pros, like I said, if they enjoy being here and if they want to work for it and they're willing to be here for the process, and the process means even the rides that aren't as much fun and even the runs in the show pen that maybe didn't work as you'd hope, then I'm happy to help them through that, because I have to work through it myself and I'm happy to help somebody else go through that process.
That's awesome. And so many of the comments that we got on the nomination forms about you were talking about how incredible your communication style is as a coach and as a teacher, and how supportive you are, and how you like uplift your clients. And they were just such positive, incredible comments about your coaching style. Do you have any like really key principles that you keep in mind when working with non-pros, or did this just come very naturally to you?
I think what I really try to make happen is that to point out the good and the bad. They gotta know what they need to do better in order to be able to improve. And then on that stuff, I really try to give them a plan. It's like, okay, you're gonna run down there and you ask them to stop, and the stop didn't work. Then this is what you need to do in order to make it happen. So the next time you can go down there and it works. And that will just help them gain a lot of confidence. And then I also make sure that I point out the stuff they did well and they did improve on, because I need them to want to come back the next time and work harder, instead of go home and be beaten down and dread the next lesson. So I think that's those two components that are really important.
Another thing that was included in the video that was sent over for your nomination is that you've also kind of helped create the para reining event that happened at some of the Arizona horse shows this year. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and what kind of inspired you to push for those events to take place at those horse shows?
Yes, so the girl that was in the video, her name is Everly. Her older sister is really involved in the reining, and she's always wanted to be part of it. And I always told the parents that they should bring her over, because I have a gelding that he's a saint. You can put anybody on it, he's safe, and he won't do anything if you don't ask him to. He's not gonna run off, he's not gonna leave the arena. He's just a very, very good horse. The older sister actually rides with Martin, and eventually they started bringing her over on a pretty regular basis. And then I was kind of thinking about, well, we have a pair program for NRHA, and I was talking to the board members of AZRJ if we could um, just make it a part of our horse shows. And then we ended up, for now, just making it a club class. And we may take that to the next level. I mean, I think that needs to be talked about at some point, but for us, it was just at this point, just allowing Everly to be a part of it is huge for her, because she comes to every horse show. She always wants to help, and she's just very, very pleasant to be around. And for me, she deserves that. She deserves to have a spot where she fits in. And my hope with that is that maybe in the future, people that have kids like that, or not just kids, even adults, that if they find out about this, that we can draw more people into this, because we actually have classes that make sense for them to enter.
And having that inclusivity is so important. And we talk about that with different people on the podcast all the time about just like breaking down the boundaries and barriers to entry for all different levels of riders and different types of riders. So that's just very cool. So you have this class and that you've worked on. You really like working with your non-pros. What other aspects of the industry are you passionate about? Do you really like working with young horses or anything like that?
Yeah, I think my biggest passion is probably the young horses, and that's how I started out. That's what I did the most when I went out on my own, was starting a lot of colts and riding a lot of 2-year-olds, and I really enjoyed those horses. You make a lot of progress in little time, right? Because it's very simple at the beginning. And I just love putting a good foundation on them, and I love showing young horses that I started myself. And that's probably most young horses I get to show, I had to start myself and build the horse myself. And then even I have some 2-year-olds that move on to other programs, and it's just so fun to see them as Futurity and Derby horses go out there and do well, and then eventually turn into non-pro horses. And that's my biggest passion, I think. I just love riding the young ones and bringing them along and just helping them understand what their job is.
And I like what you just said with like your end goal, where even if they don't stay in your program and they go somewhere else, but like your idea is to make them a nice solid horse that like a non-pro could possibly go show. And I think that's really important, because I think we sometimes forget that we as in the industry forget that the non-pros are kind of what keep this industry alive. So I love hearing that, like, that's kind of your end goal, is to make sure these horses go on to have really great careers in just every aspect of it, not just the level 4 open finals.
Yep. Yep, exactly. When you think about it, I mean, it's how many horses are truly just level 4 horses and then go on to the breeding shed? Not very many. I mean, the
Right.
majority of them, they start out in the open to understand their job, and then they get moved to be a non-pro horse, a youth horse, a rookie horse. I mean, that's the type of horses that we need for those people. And they need to be solid, they need to be easy to operate, and they need to be a solid citizen.
I like a solid citizen. I like that. I love that way to describe a horse. You kind of mentioned a little bit earlier too, you are a judge in the NRHA, and you talked about how that's kind of improved your career and kind of helped you see things from a different point of view. Can you talk a little bit about just being a judge and what that's been like to kind of see things from that point of view? Because I know when I'm sitting in the stands at a horse show, I see something and I'm like, oh, that was, great, or oh, that looked like a penalty. And it's way different when you're sitting in the stands than when you're sitting in the middle of that
Mhm.
arena. And I think people forget that. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about how that's changed your perspective when it's come to showing?
Yeah, so I think part of it is that when you sit in that chair, you see the one view that really matters, right? I mean, it's like you sit in the stands higher up, you're gonna see different things or at a different angle, right? And that's especially when we have multiple judges. Some people don't understand point spread sometimes because different judges in the arena see different things from different perspectives, right? But I think mostly by judging, I've understood more some things like pattern placement. It's like, okay, now I understand why I always get told I need to hit my center, I need to make my corner square, like all these things. You kind of see the difference, and it will either increase or decrease your degree of difficulty of the pattern you're doing. And then another thing is just by watching people show, I can see things where I'm like, man, I really like that. Look how they're pressing their hand on their mane and not helping the horse at all. And that looks really cool. So I'm going to mark it higher because it's a higher degree of difficulty, versus somebody that's constantly helping the horse through everything. So it kind of makes you realize what you can show off better, and that's really what it is. It's just whatever you have, show it off the best you can, and you can make it look better than what it is. You can make it look worse than what it is. And then for the coaching, I think it's super important because a lot of the non-pros, they don't know what the rules are. They don't know what the penalties are, and somebody has to tell them. And I think that we as the trainers really got to know those rules, which when you're a judge, you have to know all the penalties and all of that, obviously, right? So, and then it gives you the credibility a little bit to tell someone it's like, hey, this wasn't good enough because this, and this, or what you did over there, that was a penalty 1 and a penalty 2. And then you're going to minus the maneuver because of it. And it just kind of helps people figure out how to be cleaner and how to be safer and not give points away that you could have saved pretty easily.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's all about perspective. And for our listeners who might not be aware, can you just briefly go over what the process is to become a judge? Like, what did you have to go through to have that title?
Yeah, so first, if you don't have a judge's card at all, you have to attend what's called the seminar. You do need 2 people to put a reference down for you for that, which you just ask people that you know in the industry, just to provide a brief reference, just that you're involved in the industry and that you're a horse person and that kind of stuff. And then the seminar is 2 days of school and then just a half a day of testing, very similar to the actual judges school, just on a different level. And you are going to watch videos of runs and you're going to evaluate them in a group and you're going to look at all the penalties. You're going to go over maneuver evaluations, right? You're going to talk about, okay, what's a correct maneuver that we would give a 0 to, and then we're going to watch examples of each maneuver score from -1.5 to +1.5, and just kind of talk about what makes them a +1, a +0.5, a -0.5, and that kind of stuff. And then the testing is basically watching. I don't remember for the seminar. I know we judged 20 runs. I don't remember what else we had to do. But then once you get through the seminar and you pass that, then you need to go to judges school, which is a similar setup. It's 2 days of school and a half a day of testing, and you go through everything. I mean, you go through what bridles are legal, and you go through the maneuvers and the penalties, and you go over things that are currently going on in the industry. And then the testing is, again, it's a set of 20 runs, which include penalties and all types of runs. I mean, good runs, not so good runs, pretty poor runs. I mean, you have to evaluate them all, and then you have to place them right. So you have to get first and second right. And a lot of times they come in pairs, so it's 2 sets of 10 runs, and you can switch the first and second and the third and fourth, but you couldn't switch the third with the first. If that makes sense, right? So you have to place the class correctly. And then you have a theory test as well, which is basically an open book test. And it's designed for you to open the rule book and read through stuff while you're trying to find the answer for something. And then once you do that, you have to retest every 2 years. So you have to attend to school every other year and retest so you stay up to date.
That's very cool. And it's nice to know that they're retesting every couple of years to stay up on trends and new rules. And, obviously things change a little bit every year. So it's great to know that there's, such a great education system out there for people who are either judges or wanting to become involved in that. And I believe in the NRHA, you don't have to be a professional to be a judge either, which is something that was kind of foreign to me, because I believe in the AQHA, you had to be a professional in order to have your judge's card. So that was a really cool thing that I learned, is that, as a non-pro, you could actually go be a judge if you were really passionate about it and you wanted to further your education in that way.
Yep, for sure. And for me, I don't see an issue being a non-pro and being a judge, because it's two different things. Just because you can evaluate the maneuvers doesn't mean you can train a horse. And even if you know how to train a horse, you train your own. I don't really I don't think it gives you an advantage that you should be considered a professional.
No, definitely not. It's like being in a different part of the horse industry. Like I work in the horse industry, but I am definitely not a professional, even though I'm involved with horses and work with people all the time in that sense. And I think I look at it the same way as, like, if you're a judge, yes, you're in the horse industry, but you're not training horses. You're not coaching people. You've learned the rules. You understand what, should or shouldn't happen in the show pen, and you're able to accurately score that. So kind of going back to, you've mentioned in this podcast when you either had clients who came with really great horses, or you helped find horses for them that really fit what they're looking to do. Can you kind of talk a little bit about your program when it comes to kind of finding that right horse for that right non-pro? Because obviously everybody's goals are going to be a little different. Not everyone's looking to compete at the Futurity or the Derby. Maybe they're just wanting to compete in the Rookie or qualify for the Run for $1 Million. How do you go about finding the right horse for your clients?
I kind of started with a basic set of goals, like what purpose are we buying the horse for, and then also what kind of budget am I dealing with, right? Because that's going to determine a little bit of what horses I can look at. And once I have those two components, then I usually start by asking the people and trainers that I know, and I usually start with the local ones, because that's just much easier to go look at. And something I really pay attention to is that they are good-minded, because that's half the battle. Like, I really try to buy horses that are good-natured, that are out of good mares, that are known to produce solid show horses. And that's really important for the longevity, because I can have a super talented freak, but if they're not good-natured, then they might be too tricky to show for a non-pro, or they might not last as long in the show pen. So I really try to focus on strong bottom lines on the pedigree, and really try to buy from solid programs, programs that I know that they do a good job from a very young age and have the foundation right. So that gives me something to work with.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for buying a horse for any discipline, right? Is that good-mindedness is paramount. So you're such a beloved coach. All these people wrote in; they had such amazing things to say to you. Um, what are your personal goals right now, and what does that look like for you, just on your showing schedule? What are you getting up to for your own personal goals?
Well, my short-term goal right now is making the fraternity finals. I'm the one I got entered. I have some more long-term goals. So I have a mare that I've been showing since she was 3, and she's 5 now. Her name is Dolly's Inferno, and we've started raising some babies out of her. So we got 2 weanlings on the ground. We got 2 coming in the spring, and we kind of try to raise 2 or 3 a year. And my long-term goal for that is to get her record going as a broodmare. And I want to obviously keep some of them and then sell some of them to good solid programs where they have a chance to become show horses. And that's kind of my little bit, the bigger project that's going to take a little bit longer because I obviously need them to become of riding age, and then it takes another year and a half at least until they hit the show pen. But that's something that I have high hopes for, and that's something we're working on right now. We just kind of got to be patient for a little while longer.
I love that. I love your goals too with your breeding program and kind of bringing up those babies and helping that mare kind of get that producer record. And it's really cool to hear that because we don't really hear a lot about the mare side of things as often as we do about, the studs where they're standing them and they're doing this and that. But it's cool to hear that side of it. And as somebody who owns mares and loves mares, I love hearing that kind of perspective of the breeding industry. Now, you said you have one in the fraternity this year. This podcast will go live right around the time the fraternity is starting. So you'll probably be competing around the time this goes out. Can you tell everybody what horse you have for this year?
Yeah, her name is She's Smart Spooks. So as you can probably guess, she's a mare by Smart Spook. And I've had her. She came to my program as a late yearling, and so I've had her the whole time. And I've shown her a handful of times this year. The latest was in Burbank just this last week, and we actually didn't have her paid up. We were gonna wait for next year, and she actually was really good in Burbank. And so I talked to the owners, and I kind of was like, well, as much as I can't promise anything, I do think she has a chance to make the level 2 finals, and I kind of think it would be a good idea to give it a try. And so they agreed, and so we just entered her like 3 or 4 days ago.
Oh, wow. So this is like a recent decision that you're going to be showing
Yes.
in a couple weeks.
Yes, it is.
That's the thing though, that's about the 3-year-olds is that, they could be so far behind in January or even the opposite, so far ahead in January. And then come October, September, you're sitting there going like, oh, maybe I don't need to show, or, oh, maybe we do need to go and pay the late fees and enter because this horse is actually coming along pretty well.
Yeah, you just never know with them young ones. Your best one the first of the year is not always your best one later on. And the people owner, they're from Germany, and they had never seen her in person. And they came over this summer just after Raining by the Bay, after she got shown the first time, and they kind of watched her ride and rode her a couple times, and they asked me about the fraternity. And I said, well, I mean, they were like, well, right now that's not enough what we got. And I'm like, well, you're right, but we also got 4 more months, like I think you just got to see how she develops. I can't promise you she'll be far enough along in 3 or 4 months from now, but the only way to find out is to keep riding her and give it a shot, and she's just one of those horses and she's always been that way all her life. She's never made a big jump. She's been a type of horse that's it makes slow progress and small steps, but she is pretty consistent about it. And even last year as a 2-year-old, when we talked about her, I told them, it's like, it can be a strength, especially as a 3-year-old, because she's not one to throw big surprises at me, like all the stuff that she does, good or bad, it really is pretty consistent, which gives me a chance to prepare for that, and that's what I look at that as an advantage, because I can prepare. I can be prepared when I show her, and I can be better about the preparation to show because I have an idea what's going to happen or not,
Oh, absolutely. Well, and when you say consistency, I mean, that's what we're all shooting for in the show pen, right? Is a consistent horse who's going to be the same time after time. And if she's consistent every time you ride, whether it's good or bad, at least you know what you have.
Exactly.
So, we'll be cheering for you in a couple weeks. Good luck. That's really exciting that this just happened in the last couple days. But it sounds like you have a very good group of non-pros who are also heading to Oklahoma City here in a couple weeks. So you're going to have your hands full. For the people who are listening and who want to learn more about you, where can they follow you on social media or online?
I have an Instagram. It's LVK Performance, and then you can look up LVK Performance Horses on Facebook as well. So you'll find contact information there. My phone number, my email, everything is on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us, and congratulations again on winning Trainer of the Year. We absolutely loved watching your video and reading all of the entries that came in from your clients and people who have been rooting for you for a long time. And it was just, it's so cool to be able to honor trainers like you who are really making a difference for this industry. So thank you again for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
This episode is brought to you by Cosequin. Visit cosequinequine.com.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com to see all the cool things that we're up to. And if you have any comments or questions, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys. And if you like what you're listening to, please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.